Are you staring at a conditional use application? Well, in Utah, there are 4 rules that cities and applicants need to know about. I'm a land use consultant, so let's break it down. A conditional use is essentially a permitted use with certain conditions attached that are imposed by the city to make the use more appropriate for the general neighborhood. Rule number 1 is that any conditions the city imposes need to be based on objective standards, and you'll find these standards in the local zoning ordinance, where the city has passed a law that tells administrators what conditions need to be imposed. Rule number 2 is that the city must approve an application if there are any reasonable conditions that would reduce or mitigate the anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use. Or in other words, if there's any way to make the property work, to make the application work with the neighborhood, then the city must approve. This is great news if you're an applicant, because that means there's a general presumption of approval. Rule number 3 is that any conditions the city imposes must be stated on the record, and they must reasonably relate to mitigating the harmful effects of the proposed use. Finally, the 4th rule is that in order for a city to deny a conditional use permit application, it must have substantial evidence that there are no reasonable conditions that would reduce the harmful effect on the surrounding properties. In other words, the city needs to back up its decision with substantial evidence. And if the city doesn't have substantial evidence and it denies a permit anyways, then that decision is illegal because it's arbitrary and capricious. Thanks to Utah's Property Rights Ombudsman for sponsoring this and other educational videos, and thanks for watching.